Okay. Hi, everybody. This is the SIG Network Network Policy API sub project, and this is an official Kubernetes CNCF meeting. So everybody, be nice to each other. And now, Ricardo, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jay. So we have an agenda here with the first 15 minutes to pass through the cap and issues that we have open to the port range in the namespace selector. I don't know if Abhishek wants also to pass through the cluster scope and network policy. We have, I've left 30 minutes to discuss the document from Andrew about the summarization and the user stories that were left behind in this first pass. And then we have 10 minutes left for ideas and next steps and discussing anything else that we want. So if anyone wants to propose anything else, please put here in the agenda before the last 10 minutes. And I'm going to share my screen. So here we go. Where is it? Let me close everything. Yeah, so we have started to discuss about the port range cap. It's over here, and Andrew, Abhishek, and also Dan Winship, they have joined us in the discussion of the cap. And Andrew has asked me to write a document so we can discuss about the syntax and the localization of the location of each of the fields before doing another commit into the cap. So here is the document. We've got the original proposal, and I honestly I can't remember why I wrote that. I just wrote anything that came to my mind. And then Andrew and Abhishek, they have proposed this syntax, having a port range field, whenever this field is going to be, with a from and to, and a single port specification if you want to specify a single port, or the from and to, and the exception being an array of singular ports being excluded from this port range. So you might have a from, to, and the exception field, or you might have only the single port field. And we have something to decide here about if we want to support named ports like HTTP port and HTTPS port for whatever CNI supports this. If we want to use single port inside the port range, inside the port range spec, if we want this inside the port range.
Wait, why would you want to support a named port for a port range?
I don't know. We already support it in the service and the endpoint API, so I thought that like someone would ask this because some sort of CNI supports named port like check.
Well, it seems like that's a really weird because it's like not a quantitative thing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So I think it makes sense if we are also going to support single port range. Oh, sorry, not port range. Sorry, single ports in the same struct. Then maybe we can have a validation wherein the name port is available only if it's a single port field, or the field type could be int or string, just to be similar to how the current ports are.
Like
So
having here HTTP instead of the numbered port, right, Abhishek?
yeah.
Okay.
So the type could be like an int or string here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you might have like a case where a CNI or an enterprise firewall or anything supports an named port, reads from etc/services. I don't know. So maybe this is something we need to look at, Jay.
So just a question here. You basically have a port range for this field, right? Why you have a single port here? I'm a little confused. What's the difference of this one versus the one above says port 6379?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. We should remove that. Or yeah, I had the same question. Like, why do we have both?
Okay,
I mean, you
Abhishek.
already said port range, right? I don't think you have a single port here.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
okay. So when I think suggested was, I think Ricardo also had the same thought process, was that the port and protocol are existing fields today. And if we want to have a single field for all the ports, then maybe we deprecate the existing field, but still support it, and then internally convert it into the new struct. This is similar to how for pods, you had multiple pod IPs that were introduced. We still have two fields, one pod IP and one pod IPs. And the pod IP is internally converted into the pod IPs field until we deprecate and delete the old field. And that was my thought process, but I could be wrong.
I was thinking that you want to add new field, right? So maybe just add a port range field instead of obsoleting the old one. Basically, then you have a backward compatibility. Because right, so if you say okay, if you do a single port, then you just program port. If you have a port range, then you program port range. Would that be good enough? Or
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that also makes sense.
Okay, so by the proposal, we can remove this from here, right?
And in particular, like I think if we were to go with the other proposal, which just puts port ranges in its own field, not under ports, then I think it makes more sense. Yeah, like in this scenario, I think it even makes even more sense to not have port and port ranges.
Okay, so you are saying that we might have only ports or port ranges in the validation, right? In the spec, sorry.
No, I think there can be both.
Are these two proposals like logically equivalent, and it's just the data structures we're debating here, or is there some fundamental thing that one can do that the other can't?
Actually, this was the second decision, Jay, like about the location and naming. If port range was going to be inside the ports, or if port range was going to be part of ingress and egress and not part of the ports.
Yeah,
So
that seems like
this is the difference.
It feels to me like there's some kind of different story that one would support over the other. That's why I'm asking, but I just can't think of what that would be.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like it'll change the way the validation happens, because now you're inspecting. Like if you put port ranges as a top level field in ingress, you just have to validate one or the other. Whereas if it's embedded in just ports, you'd have to go through every port and then validate against each. But I agree, like it's not a huge difference, but I think it's worth squibbling over and seeing which one looks better, at least in YAML and whatnot.
Well, what I'm saying is I don't know if it's a difference or not, but if it's not a difference, that's fine. If everyone else agrees, I'm just not sure. I just want to make sure at least one of us is sure that it's not going to logically prevent certain things from it.
Can you go back up? I want to see what the other one was.
It seems like semantically it's confusing to keep port and port ranges, right? Because ports are like a kind of like a top level thing as is.
Sorry, you're saying not to embed it into ports, or you're saying to keep them separate?
I guess I'm kind of saying that right now ports, like, I guess they need to, it's almost like, yeah, the best thing would be to have them, I guess I don't know what I'm saying because I'm not sure what's better. I can see.
So I'm starting to think that the distinction that we have to make a decision is, will there be network policies where you specify both single ports and a range? And I think yes, there are. And based on that, like which one makes more sense? Maybe the first one in that case.
This one, right? Like having port and port ranges, and you can like exclude one from the other.
I think so, maybe.
Yeah, I was also thinking that the single port proposal just makes sense in this case here. Like, so we are moving to a port range. You can use a ports or port ranges, but if you want to use port ranges with a single port, you might have this like here as an individual field. But I agree that the first one here is much more clean.
Yeah, that's the one that's intuitive because it's not trampling the logic of the old one. And it's, yeah.
Yeah.
There is another choice. I'm not sure if it's better or worse. Just to provide it that if you don't want to do anything change, then it's just like you use a port before as a number, but now you change that to be a string so that it could be either port 6379 or port 30K to 3020K.
Yeah, I really like that. I just knew that it wouldn't get accepted because it's kind of a little hacky, but that's totally what everybody wants, right? That's what we all do on EC2, right?
And that seems like the easiest way, and then it's very natural. And don't do any accept or things because it's only one dimension. You don't need to do accept.
Yeah,
I mean, you can cut the rest.
Yeah, this one is awesome. There's no debate that this is the best thing. It's also totally impossible for
it's different from the first one though, for original proposal though, because that one you have a list of ports, right? Because the original way of doing these ports is like you have a list of protocol port, right? So maybe we don't want to change that. The only thing we change is this port could be either a single port or a range, which like separated by dash.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You see what I mean?
So Zane, you're saying like instead of a new port range field, we are just adapting the existing port field to like parse different forms of strings that can include ranges?
Yeah, that's what everybody really wants.
Yeah, then you just change that tab. Instead of an integer, you can be an interdashed integer.
Like, how likely is that to get completely rejected if we tried to bring, like, Andrew, like, what do you like? Would that just get completely shot down if we tried to push this up to the broader SIG?
I don't know. I think it'd be helpful to put examples like here, what that would look like.
I mean, I
like,
think
is it basically this one? Like, is it basically like what we have right here, what Ricardo put here for port range, but it's just on the existing ports field? Or saying, did you mean the syntax will look different too?
I was thinking that it's on the same port field. Right, so it's like this, and yeah. And then you can have next one with another dash protocol TCP port. I mean, it's basically the same as currently, right? Yeah, and then that one could be a single port.
Anybody else have an opinion on this? Does this seem particularly intuitive to anyone else here?
I mean, it's really intuitive.
Yeah, I think it is intuitive, but I feel like on the API best practices world, there's going to be something around like you shouldn't modify like interstring values into, like you shouldn't like add more meaning into existing interstring values.
Then how about we change that port to port range so that it's also a new field, but it's just a string. So we don't do that complicated from to accept.
I think somebody's going to find a reason to pick on it still, but it's slightly harder to pick on than.
I think that the problem of this one was the exception, right? The exception inside the range.
Right. The API would look ugly if you have multiple exceptions in a large range. Then you end up having like like the value of the port ranges become weird because they cut off at some point, and then the next range starts at a.
You have
Like,
to
it gets hard to read.
you have to have a comma in there or something, or a colon or some weird.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, either way, I was just thinking that it looks like pretty complicated for a simple requirement. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I totally understand that there could be some. I mean, this is a one-dimensional thing, right? So unlike IP address, which
We are
probably
here
is
to,
harder
we are here to
find.
discuss. So I'm okay with both proposals. I have
Actually,
no
can we
strong
write
feeling.
it down? Like, can we write down what Zing's proposal is? Like, if I have let's say I have a port range like between 30,000 and 31,000, and I have exceptions at like 3,001 or 30,001, and somewhere in the middle, and like I have 5 exceptions between that. Like, would it be hard to read?
Just a moment. Yeah.
I feel like you might just do like 3 port ranges, right? Like port range, port range, port range, port range, port range.
Right. I mean that.
Comma
Yeah.
separated list, right?
Look at me, Jay.
No,
I'm a Google Docs engineer.
I know you're getting good at this, man.
well, I
Yes.
think what Zing was saying is that it wouldn't be comma separated. It would just be multiple ranges where the exceptions are just cut out of each range. Right?
Okay, so
Let's see. Let's go through it. I mean, probably that would work. Let's see.
like this one to 30, 39, but I want to skip the 30, 30, 41, so this way.
Right, and then if you have a single one, you just do port.
I mean, that's fine too.
Right. I mean, it just looks much shorter. I don't know if.
Why can't we have exceptions? Oh, never mind. I was going to say like this one, like when you insert in IP tables, but we'll break things. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the extent of like ethical hacking the API we could do is add that one dash. I don't think we could make our own like for complete DSL for defining port ranges inside of a string.
I think even the dash will be a bit like contentious. Like, do we have anywhere else in the API where we have like a dash to indicate a range or anything like that?
We can also have an array there, just to say, like you will have a bracket, right?
Like an even numbered array.
Or just two. It's like this, like you have a square bracket.
this way.
Yeah, that is another way, but I don't know.
But I think that's pretty confused.
That's work. Oh, okay.
When you put that in the API spec, how are you going to say that the first field is always the to, the from, and the second one to?
That's true. I agree. I
I
mean, I'm just throwing out the ideas. Maybe.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
I agree that bracket is confusing. I agree. So.
Yeah, the bracket will be interpreted as a list.
Separating with 2 points, yeah, with comma.
So I guess the real question is, do we want to pursue, we all, I think, kind of agree this is an interesting thing. Is it something that we want to pursue, or is it something we don't care enough to like worry about? Because I agree that it would be really cool. I just feel like probabilistically, is there any way we're going to come up with a good syntax for it that's terse, that we think has a high probability of being accepted?
One thing I could feel difference is which way is easier to validate with a schema. Like for example, your from needs to be smaller than 2, or your except needs to be in the middle.
Or even like
with-
parsing, the CNI has to parse that range and like do a string parse and find out what the from and to is.
And I think it will be the onus of in the API server code that we need to add this validation logic. Because this is a string, then we need to figure out whether this is a name port or this is a range of ports. So there's going to be a lot of ifs and else in validation.
So it sounds like everybody's basically saying it's a cool idea, but there's probably no practical way we could get it through.
Okay, so if that's the case, then probably we should stick to the original proposal with from to accept. Does that sound?
I just don't understand why this is not viable. Like, can't we do just a string response split inside the API and check if this is like an array of two?
It's viable for us, but it's not going to be viable for people that review APIs for a living.
Well, no, like, so from the implementation of the, from a CNI implementation perspective, right? The CNI has, like, we're offloading complexity off of the API and telling the CNIs to be like, parse this string in this format. And if it's not in this format, then, you know, unknown behavior.
It's less self-describing, it's less declarative, it's not type safe. There's all sorts of computer sciencey sort of problems.
But I think the validation of this will not be in the CNI. This should be in the API server itself, or in like Kubernetes KK repository as well. Because similarly, because even for the IP blocks, the validation logic is present in Kubernetes and not in the individual CNI providers.
Right. But they still have to parse it, right?
Right, yeah, we still have.
Yeah,
Like,
I was going. Go
from
ahead, Abhishek.
a perspective, I think this is more intuitive, but from the API perspective, I don't know if people will shoot it down.
Seems like
Okay,
someone should at least validate that. Like, someone should go through the cycles of like asking maybe one of the API approvers and seeing if it's actually a crazy idea or if we're just kind of making things up.
Okay, I might ask this in the API machinery.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing just to know whether we may be. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Zhang, because I was thinking the same thing, but I was afraid to say anything because I was afraid everybody would just say I was crazy. But maybe there's like a 1% chance that we can keep the string thing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put this as a discussion.
Maybe let's just put this as an option and then just talk with API guys to see which, or talk with team to see which way he would prefer. I mean,
out of curiosity, did we agree that the validation should be on the API and not on the CNI? Because if there is no validation on the API, the CNI can have different restrictions, right? Every CNI can have different.
I mean, it would be nice if we can put the validation to the schema.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the middle one, right? I believe you can. The only thing I wasn't sure is, the schema validation probably cannot tell you that from is smaller than here, or except must be in the middle. I mean, this kind of cross fields validation is pretty hard in schema, but schema can tell you. For example, there's a dash must be the string because it must match up pretty regex. That one is easier to do because it's a single field. Think about it, right? It's hard for the schema to do cross check across different fields.
Okay.
So just as a decision of this one, I might bring this to the API folks and ask them if it's valid to make this sort of validation inside the API machinery. Is that okay for everyone?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I also know that for the current, for example, IP block, right? We have a requirement to say that except needs to be within the IP block. But in practice, you cannot validate that in schema. CNI provider just skip that except if it's outside of the range. Yeah.
Okay, and about the exception field, is everyone does everyone agree that we might have like the exception one inside the port, like not declaring this in the port range, or anyone have some strong feeling that we need also to have an exception field here? like having this inside the port range and maybe having the except, like having another exception field that if port range is declared, this one is also an array of integers.
Or whether it should be whether exceptions should.
Yeah, like having, instead of having this, we declaring this.
I mean, it feels to me like the way I would do it is I would first check to see whether that dash is reasonable at all.
Okay.
And then I would kind of probe that stuff, because it's like there's a million things you could do for the accept. And
Okay.
I don't even know if it's worth it to worry about it until because this whole thing, they may just say no, right? But I don't know. That's just my thought.
Okay, so let's move forward because I've like spent 30 minutes in this one.
The other thing to follow up, we could do it like asynchronously, is whether we have to validate like ranges between each other, like if one range overlaps another, if that should fail validation.
Yeah, the location inside the ports having a port ranges field, the first one, is that okay to you, Andrew? Instead of having like a ports and a port ranges?
I don't know. What do other folks think? I'm not sold on either one yet. I think I need to think about it more.
Yeah, just.
But it seems like the group is leaning towards having port ranges in the current ports field. Maybe just call it range instead of port ranges because it's already under ports.
Okay. I'm just, well, okay, so I think this is a range, right? Seems good to me.
I kind of feel like the overlap thing, as far as that goes, I feel like that's a no-op to me, because I feel like if somebody wants to redundantly declare that a port is allowed, that's kind of okay based on the allow semantics, but it would be weird if somebody allowed a port in range in one declaration and then disallowed it as an accept in another. But I feel like there's a logical OR there that's happening, which is kind of the overriding way things are done.
As long as there is a allowed rule, it should be allowed.
Can't hear you, Abhishek.
Even if there is conflicting port, the allowed port in the port range, and then the same port number in the accept range, as long as there is an allowed rule, it should honor that.
Yeah, that should be a union if you have conflicting, because we are doing whitelist here anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So by now, anything else in this one, folks? Let's move forward. 1 and 2. Okay. So Jay, do you want to present your doc?
Sure.
Space selector. Do you want me to open here, or do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I can share it.
Okay, so let's stop sharing.
Oh, I guess you're already sharing. Well, never mind. Okay, there we go. Oh, no, there it is. Okay, you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Do I have it here? Oh no, here it is. There we go. There it is. Okay. So I copied Gobin's proposal and I just like redid it that way. I feel like that's kind of the new thing we're doing, and I feel like it's kind of makes sense to do this.
Can you zoom in a bit? It's a little small.
Yeah. Let's see.
Actually, we are seeing your whole screen, Jay. That's
Oh yeah, that's why. Okay.
yeah.
Well, either way, I'll just make it bigger. Is that good?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So now this is spread across 2 pages, but I can just put a page break in here. So this is roughly, I mean, we all kind of know what this is. So I mean, I guess it's worth slightly going through this. It's kind of like, so I spent like 4 hours the other day, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, like reading everything I could find about how the API evolved. And I dug this one thing up. We have a page about this. And actually, so this goes back all the way to 2016 when they made this API. They were saying, you know, I don't know if we should use labels. And so there's a recent SIG network issue that came up again about this. And it was pretty clear that, like, I think there's a lot of, you know, people that just want to be able to select by name instead of labels. So I feel like the argument we make for this is not going to be particularly difficult. So then the only question to me that first came up, and anybody can interrupt me here, right? Like, I'm just kind of spitballing, but the first thing that came to me was like, cardinality was what I was thinking of, right? So like, you know, right now you can have a namespace selector, and the namespace selector can select multiple namespaces because of the fact that it uses labels, and there's a many-to-one relationship between labels and namespaces, right? So you could have the same label in many namespaces. And so, or maybe it's many to many, I guess. But anyways, the point is that you kind of need it to be plural, I guess. So it's not really a namespace as name. It's more like a namespaces as name, I guess. But I think it's pretty I don't know. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. I wasn't able to think of any wrinkles, but I admittedly have been a little distracted lately. So is there much more to it than this? I don't know. Let me know. I feel like it's the same thing like we just mentioned before, as far as, you know. Well,
Yeah, I think this is pretty much what I think this is pretty much what we were kind of saying. Like, instead of namespace selector, just a list of namespace names. I think it would have been great if the field namespace selector was a top level field, and then it had like a label field and a names field, but we can't. That would be a breaking change to change. Like, namespace selector is already a label selector, so we can't do that. So I think this is the next best thing to do, and seems pretty reasonable.
yeah, so I was thinking about that, and Dan Winship, I think, mentioned something the other day about how as long as you don't break the YAML, it's not technically a breaking change. Is that true? Because you can do an API conversion between, or no?
I think so, but then it would be a code breaking change for like CNI implementations of it, maybe. So that's a good point. Like, I think there's a way to do it where you don't break the YAML, because you can just wrap the label selector under another struct that's embedded, and then you just add the names field to it.
Yeah, so if we could do that now, I guess it's a question for Abhishek, right? So you work on a CNI, right? So what do y'all do to parse these? Like, it would break your little Golang struct that parses things, right?
We kind of like rely on the fact that the namespace selector is a label selector, and then we use all the package and fields or methods and functions that they provide, the library.
Yeah.
If you move it to a different kind of struct, and then we need to have that kind of put in. And I guess there will be code changes required.
Yeah. So it's practically a breaking change, but not theoretically. And it's not a
Actually, if namespace selector, so if we had a wrapper struct and label selector was an embedded field, in the new struct, would that still be a breaking change?
No, I think as long as we should be able to still access label selector as is, I think it should not. Now I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to embed that into a new struct and add a new match name or whatever names.
Inside as a field.
Probably that should work.
That would break any controller that has to construct a network policy though, because they have to wrap the new field. But
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, it would wind up breaking.
There is, I mean, I'm throwing out another idea. I'm not sure if you match what you guys talk here. So since we already have a namespace selector, if we, instead of match labels, you have a match name,
Mhm.
and then would that work there, or?
Yeah, let's try it.
Right, and then now you can say, you don't need that, it just dash name, right? Dash backend, dash.
It's an array. Yeah.
Right. You can do your array there. You can just
That's the-
do.
Well, but that's the one, that's the pod selector though, right?
Well, when you from a namespace, it will end up. Is that a path selector? No, we actually have a from namespace selector. So basically, your namespace selector can be under path selector or be independent, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, I
I'm
think we
looking
can-
at this example of network policy, right? Yeah, it's not under path selector. It's a separate namespace selector.
Yeah, I think what Zhang is suggesting is instead of namespaces, so that would go back to the original namespace selector, and then under namespace selector is match names, right?
Yeah, I mean that's just another choice here.
But here again, if you need to add that, you'll need to edit or modify meta v1 label selector, right?
It's typing. Okay, yeah.
We're adding at the same level of match labels.
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's the same as like we'd have to wrap the namespace selector in a new struct, like we were saying before, and add a match names field to it.
Yeah. But then also restrict other types of selector to not use it, right? For example, if pod selector is also, okay, so you're only changing the namespace selector to the new wrap.
Oh, so you are seeing underlying they're sharing the same structure?
The label meta v1 label selector.
Oh, that could be.
But then I think what Andrew was suggesting, that we create a new embedded type and only namespace selector references that embedded type, while the others still remain with the meta v1 label selector.
Yeah, so it would be in this level. This level you could do it.
Yeah,
Oh, so you are this. Okay, that's a good point. So it's already tied to a label selector. That means you can now add a actual field. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. Basically, you can extend that one.
yeah, I think that's what we were discussing before. Is if you keep the JSON tag the same, can you extend it without breaking it? And I'm not sure yet if that would be considered breaking.
I feel like the
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think we can just switch back. Sorry. I think.
no,
Sorry,
that's good. Zhang, you're coming up with all these crazy ideas today that one of them might work. Who knows?
Like I do like this better. Like I like namespace selector with match names and match labels. If we didn't have to worry about breaking changes, like I think that's much better API design.
I mean, I think this is just again something we should follow up on as a team or whatever. We should know, like, we should probably have a good feeling about these things and how they work. So maybe I'll try to hack around with that just to see if I can get it working. So I think it's a good idea just to think about.
Yeah, but I think if we want backwards compatibility, right? We need to make sure that the new basically your controller needs to be able to parse both the old version and the new version.
Yeah, it's gonna break.
Right. So then that means you cannot extend the existing field. You can only add, right? You cannot change the type. So then I agree then that we can just do a from namespace. Yeah.
Yeah, additive is always safer.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense.
But I think this is going to get more. These things are important though, so this is great because the reason I really appreciate you bringing this up, Zhang, is that I feel like at some point we're going to hit a point where we have something we want to do, maybe where we really maybe want to stretch what we can get away with in the V1 and still call ourselves V1. And so if we understand how to do these things better, it'll be good for us, I think. I mean, this is it. I don't have anything else to say about this. I didn't really find that there was a lot of corner cases here.
So your note below around regexes, I don't think we want to support that at all, because then you could you can craft your own namespace matching the regex and do stuff.
Yeah, that was Zhang's idea too.
Okay, let's not make it more complicated. We can remove regex. Yeah. The only thing though actually reminds me another thing. Is I actually in a practice I actually hit one case when we talk about namespace is they want every namespace except someone. Like for example, you want some policy to apply to every namespace except kube system.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because then every new namespace is automatically applied.
Well, over at a previous place I was at, I remember there was namespaces had names that were predictable. So people didn't just go make random namespaces, like they were prefixed. And so there's a couple of, I think, user stories there. So
well, I mean, we had these cases because we couldn't predict what user is going to add, right?
Yeah.
But we want some policy to be applied to that namespace,
Yeah.
whatever its name. So we were like, except this kube system, everyone else needs to obey that. So do we want to consider that case? Or do we think we...
Sorry, I thought that would be a good case for cluster number policy, no?
Well,
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, yeah, that could be.
It can be a
Yeah.
user.
You apply some guardrail or restrictions to every non-privileged namespace.
Yeah, correct. So it's kind of like a for loop that just applies a basic policy to all namespaces
Yeah.
that you select. Yeah. So that could be a cluster number policy use case, but if anybody has another opinion, curious to hear.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same, like how much is this related to cluster network policy? So I plus one for that.
I mean, if it's in the from, it's not changing to me, it's not necessarily cluster because, I guess once you have a port range, you're doing something weird with the data model already, where you're starting to expand to, I don't know. I mean, I feel like when you have a label selector, you're already allowing people to select multiple namespaces. Now we have a port range, we're allowing people to select multiple ports. So I don't think that this increases the cardinality of what's being selected against in any fundamentally different way than what you get with a label selector. So I'm not sure, to me, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like we're cheating and making a cluster network policy by using the regex. It feels like it's a natural thing to do. But I don't have a strong opinion. I guess I'd be down to pursue the regex, but I don't think we have enough strong opinions in favor of it.
My feeling is we may not need to, we don't need to support regex, which is so too complicated, but we might at least support all namespace except.
Oh, and except, okay.
Right. So, so at least for that particular case, we are able to address it. I mean, I agree that it can be just in cluster network policy, but we probably eventually need to solve it there, right? It says every namespace except the kube system can talk to external, for example, right?
So then we'd have to do like a all, which would be like a Boolean, or we do an all except. Ooh, that would be hard to express. Any ideas on how you express this? I mean, like we could do all namespaces.
You can use this from not namespace, for example, so that
from not.
or namespace exclude. I don't know what's the better name.
Like, well, you could do an exclude.
Exclude namespaces probably.
You say exclude namespace.
How would you express all? I guess that would work because that, well, but exclude doesn't. So would that satisfy your kube system? So this thing comes up and it creates explicit from rules for backend and vault. And then what does it do? It doesn't exclude namespace. So it makes an empty, it makes a, since we can't.
So maybe we can't support regex, but maybe we can support like wildcard as a special case.
Uh-huh.
Like a prefix.
Yeah, we can literally that exact character as an all.
Yeah, like that character or an exact namespace only.
You know,
that
people
way,
will
like
try to using regex if you do that, but yeah,
I don't know. Another question is, how does this interact with namespace selector?
I would think they have to be mutually exclusive. Like you have to use the label selector or this one.
I was thinking it would be additive.
Yeah.
Right? Because why would it not be, right? Like the namespace selector as is, if I have a namespace with 1 million labels on it and one of them, and I'm only selecting for one of them. So if I have an empty namespace selector, or you know what I mean, then it selects anything, right? So
Gee, then that's actually a little weird. For example, if you have a namespace here says allow from backend, then you have another one says from namespace selector backend and path -- like whatever label. What does that mean? Are you going to allow every path from that namespace, or you only allow the paths with selected label in that namespace? I got a little bit confused here now. Okay, if it's a union model, that means once we write here, everything inside that namespace is allowed.
So what's the question?
Okay, my question is, okay, with this schema, right, how do we express that we only want to allow path with selected label in namespace A? How do we do that?
Pods with so we're not changing pod selector, right? We're only changing namespace.
What is it right now?
Okay.
Is a question about can the namespaces still be used in conjunction with the pod selector?
Right, that's one. I guess the answer of that should be yes. Is that right? So a path selector can be used together with namespace or namespace selector.
So,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I think they are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, what we were saying is before we were saying that whether it should be like whether namespaces and namespace selector should be mutually exclusive, but I think I don't think we're going to touch pod selector.
Okay, so basically, for example, when you have this, when you have the current configuration that Jay is doing here, what does it mean? It means it can be talked
means that,
from a, yeah, go ahead.
so in this one, you have a pod and a namespace selector. So you're going to need basically any namespace with A1 or any namespace named backend or vault plus but with the exception that in those namespaces, the pods that you're talking to need to have the label B2.
No, that's not plus, right? When you have an array here, it's not plus, it's all.
I think
You
it's
have-
only
Oh,
when
yeah, I may have
you
written it wrong. I meant to write and. I thought it was, if you have both, it's an and.
If you don't have the dash, then it's and,
Oh, yeah, okay.
right? I mean, if you don't have dash on two of
Oh, yeah.
them, I'm not saying that you remove all of them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Then put a dash on the first pass vector, right? Yeah. So if you do this, then it's and,
Yeah, that's what I meant to do.
right?
Yep.
Right, but then this actually is,
Yeah, this is pretty confusing if put it this way.
this is very confusing.
I feel like in this case, namespace selector and namespace should be mutually exclusive. Like you can only specify one. Sort of like the port. I don't know. It's not a good analogy, but yeah. In this case, I don't think.
Yeah, it's mutually exclusive. Okay, I think that makes
I
sense.
mean, I'm fine with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that having. It feels like it doesn't need to be, but if it's easier to do it that way, fine. You know what I mean?
I think if namespaces is going to support that wildcard character, then it definitely has to be mutually exclusive. But if it's only names, then I could see it working with both. But
Yeah, you can't have wildcard and have all that other crap. So, so we're looking at something like this.
I'd say we should run with mutual exclusive for now, and think more about whether they can be together. But I think that's a reasonable starting point.
Yeah, I think we should just run with it. I don't think there's no value in supporting both together because there's no way to clearly define what the hell exclude namespaces is applying itself to.
So do we still explore the path of having this single type with the namespace selector and try to have match names as part of match labels? Are we still going to explore that to see whether it's technically feasible? I think that would be the best approach.
I agree. That's Zhang's suggestion with match names is the most elegant solution. We just have to explore if it's actually a breaking change, and I think it's worthwhile to do.
I'm thinking about the exclude namespace also excluding the matches from labels and not only from names. I don't know if you have discussed about that because it makes sense as if I want to match any namespace with a sort of label, but I know that one specifically I don't want to match, so I want to exclude that namespace by name.
Sorry, I want to make sure I get the schema down for Zhang's thing before 3 minutes.
Yeah,
we're
not going.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jim.
What was it again, Zhang? You want to type it in here? I forgot.
Yeah, I can try to type there.
Andrew, I've made you make the document for today, and you're not going to pass through it today. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
You lost your PTO doing that. Sorry.
No. We can do it offline, or we can do it next week. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Show people. Where is it? So Andrew did some PTO work for us. So thank you. Let's see, what is it? Or I guess we shouldn't encourage that one. But anyways, I don't know. Where is it?
Yeah, let's just wrap up the namespace selector discussion so that
Okay.
we know what the next steps are, and we can go over that one next week, or we can do it offline. Like people just review it.
Yeah.
Basically.
Just FYI, it's here. So if anyone wants to look at it, he's kind of went and clarified the ones that we were actually talking about into some succinct paragraphs, which is really cool. Okay. I think this is it. I mean, it's 5 o'clock. So I think, Zhang, if you've got that in there, I can noodle around with how we might be able to implement that.
Yeah, I think I already put it here. Take a look to see if I'm missing something.
If there's a way to, yeah. All right.
One last thing, Andrew, if you can ping Tim or maybe KZ, I think that they answered you better than me to ask them for the Slack channel, because I think that we can arrange this asynchronous in Slack.
We could also just bring it up in SIG Network on Thursday. It's this Thursday, right?
Yeah, I did, but got no answer. So I'm going to send you the PR, and if you can ping Tim or anyone else, because I think that they got a lot of things to do also. So, or we can move that to SIG Cloud Provider, because Andrew is a SIG lead there and he can approve to us.
No, don't do that.
SIG Cloud Provider Network.
Don't do
policy.
that.
Like it when you do stuff like that.
Okay, folks. So I think this is it for now, and we are going to make the review of this doc as the first thing in the next meeting, Andrew's document. So thank you all, and have a nice week.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
You too. Bye.